Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today I've got a show where it's an easy one for me because I can just sit back and relax. I'm only here to moderate. This is a show we provide for anyone who wants to have a conversation online and doesn't have their own channel. Even though one of my guests today does have his own channel, but we'll talk about that a little later. If you want to come on for this, just shoot me a message, email me. The ways to contact me are in the description, and we can set something up for you. So for today, we've got two guests. One of my earliest followers, I think, on Twitter, and longtime friend Scipher, and he met a man on Twitter, and they are going to have a conversation. So welcome, gentlemen, to the channel. Scipher, I think your third appearance here, I think, by now.
Yeah, it's just two with Tim and...
Yeah,
so this is the third one, yeah.
Yes, it's good to have you back. And Craig,
thank you for inviting me.
Welcome to our channel. It's your first time out on YouTube, I think?
Yep, first time ever. Unless somebody caught me walking away somewhere at the state fair, maybe something like that.
Okay, so most people have known Scipher. Scipher, do a quick introduction of yourself, who you are, and what you do. That might be for people who don't know you.
All right, so I've been a science teacher for almost 20 years. I started out in college just being interested in natural sciences due to my mother being a master gardener and my father an environmental engineer. And when I started college, because I had so many theological books on our bookshelves at home, I started out in cultural anthropology, studying religion. Took some classes at seminary doing that, and when I transferred to a different college, I decided to switch it to biology, and specifically, I kept going along the lines of cultural anthropology with some ethnobotany classes and stuff like that, but decided to switch it to kind of something I've been studying for quite a while, because when I was in high school in 1987, Edwards versus Aguillard came out, the famous kind of first creationist case here in the United States, and decided to pursue evolutionary biology and graduated with a bachelor's of science in that, and then started a degree, a continuation of that degree due to one of my mentors in college, David Milton, who actually debated Duane Gish in 1978. I started a dual bachelor's of arts in creationism, basically looking at the history of creationism over time, especially since the 1950s onward. Because that's kind of when you start to see young earth creationism come out. It didn't really exist, again, we'll get into this maybe later. Young earth creationism didn't exist before the 1960s due to a particular book and a nice lineage, phylogeny that we can follow back.
The book you mentioned, we did an entire series of shows on that book. I think you're referring to the book that Jehovah's Witnesses published. The book,
no,
I think.
No, it was Seventh-day Adventists. And it was Whitcomb and Morris, called The Genesis Flood. Yes. It came out in the early 60s, I want to say 1963. And it was based off of Ellen White, who is the founder of Seventh-day Adventism. basically saying she was taken back in time to see the 6-day creation event. And one of her followers, George McCready Price, who is a Canadian geologist, was a Canadian geologist. He was a kind of one of these tent revivalists who used to travel around, and one of his things that he would incorporate into his evangelical tent sermons was the idea of a young earth. So he wrote a book, oh boy, 1929, that's probably wrong, called New Geology. So George McCready Price was the lead up to young earth creationism, but it really didn't become popularized anywhere because George McCready Price was not that well known until Henry Whitcomb and John Morris came out with the Genesis Flood in the 60s, in the early 60s.
Yeah, we did a series on a book that the Jehovah's Witnesses brought out in, I think it was 1968. And that has probably every single claim you've ever heard is in that book, which is kind of weird if you think of it.
I might have it in my library because I've got a library of creationist literature and videos and stuff like that going back, even before the Genesis Flood. So book. But yeah, no, I need to look into that because I know that they have been involved in young earth creationism for a long time as well.
I'll send you a picture of that on Twitter. So,
Thanks.
Craig, you're new to all of this. Can you do a quick introduction of yourself?
Sure. Well, as far as I guess to be pertinent to the show, I was an atheist all my life until I was about 21, 22 years old. And a guy showed me you call that a chick track?
A chick track.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't even know the name of it. So it showed in it the exact same thing that I was brought up in school was how mankind was monkeys, and they became a more stand-up monkey, then a more stand-up, more stand-up, more stand-up. And they had names for like the top 5 of them, including Cro-Magnon man, Peking man, and Neanderthal man. And there was a couple others which I don't remember. But at any rate, in that track, they debunked all 5 of them basically. And I don't even remember what they said about them really. That would have been probably about 1982, so that's been a long time ago. So anyway, that got me thinking, what's going on. And then so I finally, to cut this part short, I just basically asked God, if you're real, heal me. So he healed me in 2 different instances in my lifetime. And so I'll pass ahead on that. And so since then, I pretty much put that by the wayside for years, didn't even hardly think about it. But I became a Christian back probably about 82, 83. And so recently, you get on YouTube and then you see these things pop up. So I'd never heard of Answers in Genesis or any of those. And so I started watching them. Well, of course, it agreed with what I originally thought from 40 years ago, because like I said, the churches I went to, we didn't even talk about it. So I've been studying ever since. It's probably been 3 years now. I've been kind of studying it, listening to different videos on both sides. I like both sides. And so it seems like no matter what you say, the other side has an answer for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do believe what they say, that we're both looking at the same evidence. I mean, to first of all, to say that a creation scientist is not a scientist, that doesn't even make any sense. So, I mean, there's even one that's a Harvard graduate. So to say he's not a scientist, and there's a lot of them. I mean, there's not just 5. There's a lot of them. So, so at any rate, I'm choosing to believe the kind that says the creation is real, and that carbon dating can't really be proven. So so that's the camp I'm in. So at any rate,
Okay.
we can
and
discuss that.
so you guys had a conversation on Twitter, and that's where this came out of, because Scipher knows that I tend to host things like this, and I think this is a lot better than having this kind of a conversation on Twitter, because usually it gets hostile pretty quick. So I'll leave the stage to you guys, and you can basically talk about whatever you want. So
Nice. Well, but the other thing about Twitter is that Twitter, it's really hard to follow the threads, right? You need to kind of look back and see how it's stacked up and has evolved over time. I mean, that's the way Twitter goes, right? You have one thread, it splits into two different lineages, and you need to, you know, see how it's progressed from there, how it's advanced and
mhm.
changed and mutated from there. But you know what I find the most interesting, and we did this interview, this intake interview yesterday. Craig and I and Peter did, um, and you know the one thing that I found most interesting is you brought up this chick track. So the name of the chick tract, and I can't remember the number of it, but the name of it is Big Daddy. And Big Daddy is basically based off of a professor in a science classroom kind of berating his students for, um, you know, aggressively berating his students for not accepting science. You know, and it's basically a straw man of a real professor in a classroom. And I'm not sure if it's a college classroom or high school, but it's supposed to be somewhere around there. And the person who talks back to the teacher, the Christian in the classroom who talks back to the teacher, is based off of Kent Hovind. And that's been talked about for a long time. It's been kind of supported by some of the things that have come out about that chick track. But the thing I love about that chick track, besides it coming out and influencing Craig in this way, in the late early 1970s is I think when that came out, but you know it was kind of the basis for the young Earth creationist spread during that time period. You know where young Earth creationism was trying to take over, and this is one of the things they did is they misrepresented what is called the descent of man illustration. So the wrong thing, of course, about the descent of man illustration that pretty much everyone sees out there is that it starts with a chimpanzee. And of course, you know, we don't think that we came from chimpanzees. They're related to us through a common ancestor. But Chick Track used this chimpanzee illustration, and then they went through, Craig was like five different iterations before getting to modern Homo sapiens. And each one of those steps, there's no real evidence presented. It's just kind of like, here's, you know, Piltdown Man, which was a hoax, and Nebraska Man, which was not a hoax, it was a misidentified tooth,
That was
and probably was a hoax in some ways. Um, but you know, Lucy is like the second step, um, saying it's basically just a chimp. It's not really presenting any evidence for anything it's saying. It's basically making these outrageous claims about things that we, at even the time it was written in the early 1970s, because of Johansson and other anthropologists, we know, you know, what it's saying is basically not true. So it's interesting that that was your basis for like denying science, like all of science in some way, and becoming a young Earth creationist. Um, yeah, I just find that like fascinating in so many ways because I've really never heard anyone before say that a chick track, especially Big Daddy, like influenced them to become a young Earth creationist or to change from being an atheist to you know whatever denomination of Christianity that you follow is it's it's so unique, and I think that that's like the main part of this conversation I want to get into is why did that change you into accepting creationism and denying pretty much every field of science?
well, um, that's kind of a long conversation, I think. But
I know. Well, we can break this up into different parts if we need to.
sure,
Yeah.
no, that's fine. I don't mind getting into it. Just keep asking me questions. Sometimes I get lost in
Oh,
what I'm
thank
saying.
you. I will.
So, yeah, don't hesitate to jump in too. Just get me back to where I was. So when I was in school, in fact, not even before that, my mom had a book that showed that lineage of chimpanzee to man. So I was very familiar with that growing up. And then I go to school, and that's what they're teaching. And I'm
Well, just to ask you a real quick question, didn't you weren't you concerned about the fact that chimpanzees are like a modern species? Why would they show chimpanzees evolving into you
well,
know modern humans?
okay.
And why
Now
would they
again,
put everything in between that didn't represent? like a lineage between the two.
Okay, so you're saying that because I'm saying chimpanzee, I don't know what it was in that book. In fact, I don't even know.
No,
I,
in the Chick Track, it is a chimpanzee. It actually says that. Yeah, yeah,
oh, does it really? Okay.
yeah,
So I
and
don't know. I
yeah.
don't know if I remember that correctly, but at any rate, so I guess I never thought about it, but that's what I was told in junior in grade school and junior high.
Mhm.
So I mean, that's what they told me. So I don't know why I would question it if that's what you mean.
Yeah, and do you think in junior high school is a appropriate time to address like the differences in anatomy between modern species and what we see in the fossil record? I mean, do you think it's a proper way to go about teaching human evolution in such a limited way? Because I'm sure that this lesson you had and the textbook that you were using at that point, it'd be interesting to actually see that textbook now. But do you think that was like a proper way to teach it, or do you think it could be taught differently, in a way that would
Well,
not be considered like propaganda? I think is what you were trying to say. It was.
I suppose it could have been that. I think those people generally believed it. So um, at the time, and then I think as more knowledge comes in, then of course they change things, which is okay. I mean, because even creation's the same way. Because as we get more knowledge, we might change our story a little bit. So, but to back up 1 second before we go on, and I've said this
Yeah,
in do we still call them tweets or we call them X's now? What do you call them? I don't know.
I call them tweets. I'm not going to change my
Okay, fair
my
enough.
terminology at this point.
Sure, that's fair, and I don't either. But at any rate, um, so um, I don't necessarily say that your side is wrong because I don't think I can say that because I mean the obvious thing is I wasn't there. So, but I will say that um, everything you say can be debunked, and everything the creation says can be debunked, and I mean everything. And I've watched a lot of both sides, and nothing has hit me yet that says they're both out of the park. Neither one. I mean, they're both still playing in the game, and there's no definite answer to anything. I mean, even carbon dating, there's people that say that it's not real. You probably heard him. His name is Sneller, I think. He's on. He's either on
Snelling.
PhD or he's on history. Is Genesis history. Um, he's from Australia. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
It's a Snelling. Yeah,
Oh,
can't remember his
Snelling.
first name
Okay.
right now. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's. I mean, he has a pretty good video that says that carbon dating is false. So here I sit, I do have faith in God, but at the same time, I'm going to be very logical. I'm not going to just take somebody's word for it. Just like I think I'm not sure what you were getting at the Jehovah's Witness stories earlier, but I haven't read that. But Jehovah's Witness has their beliefs, and Seventh-day Adventists have theirs, Pentecostals have theirs. But at the end of the day, most of them are pretty similar, but they have different, things that they believe in that they out of their past. So, um, so I just don't think you can take evolution as fact. And
But
I don't mean
why?
I don't think
What?
you can say
What?
the creation is fact either. You can't really
But
say that.
okay. So no, that's an interesting point as well because most of Christianity, both in the United States and the world, accept science. They accept evolution. They just are theistic evolutionists or um, creationary. Um, that's not the proper term. Yeah, theistic evolutionists. They basically say that evolution happened over billions of years, just like we see and is represented by science. But somehow a deity ran the process, and they're not going to explain that because that's theology. So that's an interesting point because what you're saying is that you don't accept the theology of most Christians in the world. You want to accept a theology that is based off of young Earth creationism, which is, as Peter pointed out, and you know, known fact that it's based off of Seventh Day Adventism as far as young Earth creationism goes. You would rather accept those theologies from Jehovah's Witnesses and Seventh-day Adventists, I think the point at which this discussion would be really productive is if we talk about the fact that what you're talking about is a theology, and I'm trying to address how science works and explains the world around us. So we can't really mix the two. This is, something that Stephen Jay Gould called NOMA, basically non-overlapping magisteria, basically saying that you can't compare the two. They're apples and oranges. They're not even that. They're like, potatoes and rocks. They're so different that the way that they come about answering questions is not related, and nor should the questions be related because they have nothing to do with one another. And so you shouldn't really mix them up. That being said, I think the thing that also should be discussed is the fact that you have this idea that the world is only 6,000 years old or so. I'm not sure the exact date. We talked about Archbishop Usher, and you accept answers in Genesis and as being a source who uses the Usher chronology that says the Earth is created around 6,000 years ago, and the Noachian flood happened around 4,400 years ago. And how should we look at your theological claims in the way that is addressed by young Earth creationism, saying that these theological claims are somehow supported by any scientific evidence? And in our Twitter discussions, we brought up like Grand Canyon, Mount St. Helens has come up. These are all common creationist tropes. The fact that mutations don't happen when they do that are beneficial, stuff like that. What do you think is like the actual evidence that you have that supports you, besides saying that somehow a deity did it, God did it? And I think that's the kind of main thing that I'm kind of interested in hearing about from you is do you think it's just all, no, we don't know, but God did it that way? Or do you think that there's actual evidence to back up your claims? Was there a Noachian flood about 4,400 years ago when there's no evidence, or I'm not sure what evidence you would provide to back that up? And it goes into carbon dating as well. Carbon dating has been confirmed in so many ways. I'm sorry to ramble, but carbon dating is based off the fact that we have artifacts of known ages that we can date. We can take a paper from a book and we can date it, going back a long time, thousands of years, where it can basically say this artifact, and not even a book, is dated to this date because it's actually written on it in some way, or we know it comes from this culture that would only exist at this time. Or, carbon dating is supported by ice cores that are laid down in annual layers, or varves, which are basically layers of sediment that are laid down in annual layers in lakes where that is captured. Or that dendrochronology, where you have trees growing and we can match the tree rings growth measurements and say that even though this tree's alive, these trees are dead, we can all match that, and carbon dating supports all of that, and that's the way it's calibrated. So basically I'm thinking about, you have this idea that this flood happened, the creation event was at this time, but why is that not confirmed about or by any field of science? And do you think there's actually scientific evidence out there, or do you think it's just God did it?
Both. Yes to both.
Okay.
To both questions. I mean, so now again, all I've really done is look at videos. Okay. So I'm not a teacher like you are, where I'm looking in science books all the time. And so and I went to the Creation Museum up in Kentucky there, which was pretty neat. And so I think there's a lot of holes in evolution, for one, and there's a few holes in creation too. So don't misunderstand that. I mean, they're in both, to be honest. So I don't feel like I'm one of these people that just says, well, what'd you say that guy's name? I don't even know who this Hovland guy is you keep talking about. Is he from Holland or something? I don't know. It sounds like.
Oh, Kent Hovind? No.
Hovind, okay. So anyway, I mean, he must be a guy who doesn't follow science evidently. So, any rate, so I like to listen to a lot of people and then kind of come to my own conclusion, I guess, in that respect. So, I guess here's the thing, and I've said this in my tweets to you, is that you can take a human and they can, through scientific processes, figure out exactly what you're made of, down to what's in your bones, what's in your eyeballs, what's in your hair, what's your hair made out of. They know all this stuff, but yet they can't make a human. They can't make I mean, if you lose an eyeball, they can't replace it with a new one of the same.
Oh, they can. They can get it from a donor.
Yeah,
It's not
but
going
they
to be the
can't.
same.
But they can't replace it with another eye that they produce. Sure,
Well,
they
why
can.
would you expect? Yeah.
They can replace.
But why would you expect that to happen? Did you just say that Kent Hovind is probably a bad scientist?
No. I said he probably doesn't follow science the way you follow it. That's what I meant.
But okay, so
I mean the way you're talking about it. Just by the way you're talking, that's what I'm catching.
Yeah, but Kent Hovind basically is the same as Answers in Genesis. There's almost no difference between the two.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
but he's the one to follow. But at any rate,
yeah.
So
I just want to clarify that.
Okay. So man knows exactly what's in whatever part of the body you want to choose, but he can't reproduce it. He can steal it from another body.
How would you think that we could reproduce like an eyeball from scratch?
That's my point. You can't, even though the scientists can't do that, even though they know exactly what it's made of. They can't do it.
Okay, but we could if we had the actual ability to attach individual atoms together, couldn't we?
I suppose. I don't know. Yeah, but
Okay.
we can't.
Yeah.
I mean, we still can't.
I know we can't currently, but
yeah.
Hypothetically, if we could attach individual atoms together, we could make any part of your body from scratch easily just by using, a bucket of dirt from outside that contained all the right elements to do so.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, it's kind of like Star Trek and transporters. If you have a transporter, you could basically, zap one person from one place to another if we knew how to do that. So technically, science could do that. It's just that we don't have the ability to do it now.
Yeah, my luck, it'd be like the movie The Fly. I'd end up with a fly in my arm. That'd be my luck if I got in one of those transporters.
Yeah, I just saw Jeff Goldblum on what was it? Jimmy Kimmel.
The Fly. He was in one called The Fly. But the first one. The first one was Vincent Price.
In the 1958, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, they were flying with Vincent Price, and that's the one I like the best.
Mm-hmm.
But black and white. But at any rate, yeah, but I mean, see, those are all things we can't do. And here's another one that I feel like is another miracle.
But we could, right? If we had the actual knowledge to, again, attach atoms individually, we could do that. And that would be based off of science. No, but we could, and it would be based off of our understanding that science gives us from physics and chemistry. Like, it would totally be possible to do.
Is it?
No, I'm saying it would be
possible.
Sure.
I don't know. You're saying you're asking me a question. You're asking me a question. Is it true? And I'm saying, is that true?
No, I'm not saying that this is a reason evolution is true. I'm saying that the fact is that if we could basically individually attach atoms to one another using our understanding of chemistry, physics, biology, we could recreate an eyeball. That would be possible if we had the actual way to manipulate individual atoms to build an eyeball. It would be possible because we already know how they all connect. That's not a, we can easily look at the molecular structure of proteins and lipids and everything else in the human body that makes up the structure that we're built of. So we could build an eyeball. We just don't have the technology to do it now.
So you're thinking we're going to be able to in the future? That's your faith?
No, it's not faith. I'm just saying that at some point in the future, we're probably going to have that ability to do so because At this point,
So that's faith.
we are already manipulating atoms in that way. We're just doing it at in a very crude way. In the same way, if you look back to, how we started to discover chemical reactions with Mendeleev, who discovered kind of how the periodic table is set up. That's why we have periods in the table, the periodic table. Yeah. That's why it's called that, right? There are similar atoms that have a similar way they associate with, there are similar elements which have a way they associate with other elements because of the electron shells and other things in chemistry and physics that we're not going to go too deeply in here. But basically, we could do that in the future. Why couldn't we do it? That it's not out of our reach. We already could do it if we had the technology to do it. Is kind of what I'm getting at with that whole thread.
Okay, but again, faith is a Christian word. Wouldn't you agree?
But this has nothing to do with faith.
Yeah, it does.
This is just that we have the knowledge to do it. We just don't have the ability to do it, and that's not faith. We understand the evidence behind how atoms and elements interact with one another. It's just that we can't individually place those atoms in a certain way to recreate what we need to do to, make an eye from scratch.
So, how would you define faith?
Belief without knowledge.
Belief without knowledge.
Yeah. Because you don't have knowledge of how something happened. You just have belief that it did happen.
Okay. So.
Which is why evolution is not faith. That's why science is not faith. No, okay. It's not faith. No, faith with knowledge is a false dichotomy. It's a contradiction. It's that doesn't make sense. Faith without knowledge just doesn't exist, because if you have knowledge, then you don't need faith, and if you have faith, then you don't need knowledge.
Yeah. And you're a school teacher, so you do know probably words better than I do. In fact, my wife always tells me I'm saying words wrong, so I don't doubt I'm wrong on this, and you're probably right. So you're suggesting it's not faith that someday we'll be able to make an eyeball, but you're saying that it's going to happen, right?
It's that we already know how to do it. It's just that we don't have the equipment to do it.
So do you think we'll have the equipment someday?
I would answer that by saying I don't think why we wouldn't achieve that at some point.
Okay.
I don't see a limitation that would cause us not to be able to do that at some point in the future.
Okay, so basically you're saying yes. Someday we'll be able to make
but that's not based off of faith. That's based off of knowledge of our current limitations.
Fair enough.
In manipulating individual atoms to combine together in a certain way.
That's fair. But at the end of the day, you're saying, yes, someday they will be able to make an eyeball. Based on your knowledge.
Why not? Well, based off the fact that we already know how to do it.
Yeah.
It's just that we don't have the equipment to do it.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So, see, now here's another anomaly that I just came up with just recently, and I've never even heard this mentioned on Answers in Genesis or Is Genesis History or any of those. But and I mentioned to you this on the Twitter thing, is that this just seems obvious to me. So a seed, and I've talked to my wife about this, she says that a seed is not dead. She says it's dormant, which is different from dead. Well, if you take any living organism and even a corn, a corn plant or a tomato plant or anything like that, and once it dies, it's dead. And it does not come back. When a person dies, you're done. It's over. You cannot, science cannot bring that person back, not any part of him. It's gone. I mean, maybe, within a few hours, he can pull the retinas out and use that retina for somebody else's eye. I mean, he can do things like that, but he can't bring that person back to life. Same with a tomato plant. You can't do it, but you can take a seed out of that thing, and it's basically dead. In my opinion, it's dead. because it's dried out, it's dehydrated, nothing's moving. It'll never move until you add water to it and a little bit of heat and light on whatever that seed needs to reproduce. So here's another thing. So you have this seed that's dead, in my opinion, dormant in other people's opinion. I'm not sure what the scientific opinion is. I suppose they say dormant. So, but it's dead. That seed is going nowhere, no way, no how. And a scientist can take that seed and tear it apart and put chemicals on it, and they know exactly what it's made out of. On every part of it. But they can't take those same pieces and put it back together and make I don't even care if they take a tomato plant seed and make a piece of corn out of it. I don't care. They can't even take that corn seed and make a bush out of it, or an apple tree. They can't do anything with it. They can't bring anything to life at all. Nothing. And make it reproduce. So I don't know. I mean, I think they can do bacteria and make bacteria grow, things like that, but that's not human. So that's just one of my things. That's like, okay, well, maybe evolution is true, and it may be. I wasn't there, but at the same time, there's a lot of things that we cannot do that happened before we were here, and before all the scientists. So, yeah. Can I just say one thing real quick? I think you said that creation didn't come about until like 1960. Did I hear you say that in your beginning statement?
The young Earth creationist movement, the Answers in Genesis, the Kent Hovind, the IRC, Institute for Creationist Research, all of these young Earth creationist organizations owe their existence to basically one book, and it's the Genesis Flood, first published in the early 60s, I want to say 1963, by Henry Morris and John Whitcomb. That is based off of George McCready Price, who was a geologist from Canada, also a tent revivalist who used to travel around and preach. And he wrote a book called New Geology, and that was in the 1920s. And he got his idea for young Earth creationism from Ellen White, who is the founder of young Earth, of Seventh-day Adventism, based in the 19-teens, probably late 1895, I think, is when she started to really get known. But she said she was taken back in time, saw the 6-day creation event. That's the basis for young Earth creationism. It didn't exist before that. Basically Christians were not young Earth creationists like we have today. In fact, they were not young Earth creationists. They thought that there was a day-age gap. They thought there was a old Earth that we could explain by science, but they somehow related the epochs and eons and periods of time to things that happened in the past that were not part of the creation event. They happened before the creation event. So that's going into like creationist theology, which we can get into too if you want to. You had some other interesting things I'm going to bring up, but I want you to, I just want to answer that question because that's what you asked.
Yeah. But let me just respond to that just real quickly, then move on to the other things that I brought up. Yeah. So I've heard videos that are just the opposite of what you just said. So.
I'm sorry, you heard what?
That evolution science didn't come into effect until just maybe 20 years before Darwin. That's the stuff I've been reading and so on.
No, it goes back all the way to the Greeks, but we can get into that as well. Yeah, it goes back to basically the Greek atomists, who oh boy, now I need to think of some of their names, but basically the first ideas of evolution go back to the Greek atomists that basically said that it's material that moves the world around us, and combining stuff together makes other things in a certain way. So yeah, evolution goes back before Christianity, before Judaism, or around the same age, a little bit later in Judaism, but it goes back before Christianity, and the idea that the world is material and that's the only way that we can explain it. And then, from there you have the Dark Ages, but during the Renaissance you have Lamarckianism and other things that occur where we're basically looking at the world and saying, the world has to be older because of these different reasons. And a lot of those people were Christians, because that's the church for the governments at the time that were funding these explorations into looking at the world around us. So, that doesn't say that creationism is wrong, but again, going back to the young Earth creationism not existing before, 60 years ago, that's where it goes back to. But yeah, evolution has a long history in ancient ideas, Vedic evolutionary ideas, and that's kind of why I brought up in one of our tweets that you're, being a young Earth creationism advocate, you were just not attacking evolution. You're attacking pretty much every single field of science, because you basically have to deny every field of science to not accept the idea of evolution occurring over a long period of time, which science has basically said the Earth has been around for about 4.5 billion years and the universe has been around for about 13.8 billion years.
Well, I don't accept that, what you
That's
just
fine.
said, because I certainly believe in science. So, and I may not be real good at analogies, but to me, this analogy is
What analogy is that? I'm sorry.
well, yeah, I'm getting ready to say it.
Okay.
So go to a party, and two people are talking to one person, and you come home and you talk about what they said, and you both have a different opinion of what they said, and you both heard every word that person said, and you might even agree on what that person said, but yet you disagree on what the person meant. So so in other words, two people can look at the same thing and have different results.
Okay,
And
so that's a cave analogy going back to what Plato and Aristotle. It's also the idea that you have a bunch of blind people, or not even blind people, but people in a dark cave feeling an elephant, and they're saying, "Oh, it's a rope, it's the trunk of a tree, it's
yeah,
this and that." Yeah.
yeah,
So that's not an analogy that actually works with science and evolution versus creationism.
oh, it does.
Because
Because
because no, it doesn't. No, I will point out why. And this is getting
okay,
back to something you said earlier. So you're talking about seeds,
yeah,
and basically, you know, s- seeds don't sprout until something happens. Until they germinate. Kind of
yeah,
that's the technical term, right? Now, if we could go into a seed, we could change it genetically to be a different plant. And we could change it to have different traits. And we could look at the history of how we've changed it. And that's kind of what evolution does, is it basically says, here's this one record we have, which is the fossils. And here's another record we have, which is genetics. And in the fossil record, that is supported by geology, which is a totally separate field of science. Paleontology is basically a part of both geology and biology. But the way that we date those fossils is based off of both geology and physics, which is another field of science. So geology and physics basically say, here's the date that this thing probably is, based off of our understanding of how things work, as far as how atoms combine, how you have unstable elements that decay into other elements over time, how you have the fact that certain layers in the ground only add up at a certain rate under certain conditions, how, going back to physics, if a certain rock is exposed to the sun for so long, it builds up a certain amount of residual energy that we can actually look at and know how long that rock was out in the sun and how long it has been, or was in the sun and how long it's been out of the sun. So basically you have all these different fields that are saying that the Earth is so old based off of all these different facts, but yet for some reason all those different facts all give us pretty much the same date. We're taking a piece of evidence from this field, we're taking a piece of evidence from this field, another field, another field, another field, and those all add up. And I'm just talking about paleontology and dating fossils, you know. And then we go to biology and we look at the chemistry that life is made of, and we see that over time mutations do add up, and this is over like observable time since we invented genetics and understood how it works, you know. So certain mutations add up over time at a certain rate, and certain genes and certain chromosomes, and that's kind of a known rate. It doesn't seem to change as far as we know, unless you do something really different and special. And then we have the fact that if you take the genetics from different living organisms, that a percentage of something that's found in humans compared to a percentage of something found in chimpanzees compared to a percentage of something found in modern dogs, and then, you know, modern deer, and then modern tomato plants, all seem to match up with the mutation rate that's known, and gives us like this date. But the date from biology and the date from basically biochemistry, testing those genes, matches the dates that we get from paleontology, which uses a completely different field of science. That should not be the case, unless that's actually what happened. You know, you can't have like one field of science comparing itself to another field of science, comparing itself to another field of science that are all kind of similar, chemistry and physics and geology. And you can't look at, you know, a completely different field of science like biology and looking how chemicals in biology change and happen over a certain amount of time as well. But yet those two separate fields that have many fields within inside them, they shouldn't match each other at all, but they do. So you know, getting back to seed banks, that's kind of what we do, right? We keep seeds, you know, in certain places where they are saved over time. You know, we have these places in these cold areas where we are maintaining seeds to be dormant for a long period of time before we can germinate them again and hopefully bring them back if we need to. You know, so I'm trying to add up all your threads and analogies here. I'm not doing the best I could, but, you know, I think, again, we're going back to, you have this theological reference in young earth creationism, and we're trying to discuss how that matches with science. Do you think that your theology is completely different from science, or do you think somehow they mesh together? Is kind of where I'm getting at with this.
Well, I think that a creation scientist looks at the same evidence you do.
But wait a second. What is a creation scientist?
What is one?
Yeah.
Well, they look at things and say, that's proof of creation. And you look at it as the same thing and say, oh, that's proof of evolution. That's the difference.
No, I just pointed out that pretty much every field of science supports evolution. So basically, what is the difference between science and creationism? Because that's what we're getting down to. You know, are you saying a creation scientist is someone who has to start by saying that the Earth is only 4,000 or 6,000 years old, or, you know, the Noachian flood happened about 4,400 years ago? Is that what a creation scientist is?
Yeah.
They start with that premise. That.
Yeah. And then he looks at that evidence.
Okay.
And he looks at all the evidence that you do. He looks at your same evidence and says, well, that fits into the, 6,000-year-old Earth science. It fits. That's what he said. How does it fit? Well, I can go over a list of things.
Let's go over it one at a time.
Huh?
Yeah, let's go over like one thing that you think is like the best piece of evidence for creationism versus science.
All right. Well, let's say, well, to me, this just makes obvious sense in my mind, is that if you have a rabbit, let's say, and I don't know how quickly they reproduce, but they can reproduce, I don't know, in a couple weeks maybe. I understand they produce quickly. So I would think with the evolution theory, you should be able to take that rabbit and two of them have baby rabbits, and then those baby rabbits, then you sort them out. You take the one that looks a different kind of rabbit, and you
So you're talking
make
about artificial selection and domestication.
exactly. Except
So
for
what about it?
So I would think that an evolutionist scientist should be able to take those animals and continue to reproduce them and select them in the same way that evolution has selected, and change that rabbit into a rat or
But
into a human.
evolution, evolution
Can't do
actually
that.
says that should not happen.
Well, why is that?
Well, because you can't escape your lineage. So
But
basically,
we
what
don't
you're
think,
saying is that we should be able to take a dog and turn it into a cat, or we should
yeah,
be able to take a cheetah and turn it into a cow.
yep. Well, for
Why do
instance,
you, wait a second, why do you think that? Because evolution says that should not occur, that should never occur. In
well, I
fact,
don't
that
know
would disprove evolution.
okay. So that's not the way I brought up thinking that evolution was. So maybe I'm
Well,
mistaken
I'm
about
sorry, I'm sorry that you had
evolution.
people who, I'm sorry that you had people that lied to you about what evolution was, is the only way I can respond to that.
Well, that same
Or
science,
that you had a misconception about what evolution actually said.
well, the same junior high science book and grade school science books that I was reading out of, they said that we came from, stuff in the ocean, and we crawled
Well,
out, became a frog, and then became a bird or whatever. And then
yeah,
so
that's
it all
that's going
started
kind
back
of
there.
really large. You were talking about the difference between different mammals, which is why I brought up different mammals.
Fair enough. So the point is that evolution scientists, and you mentioned, I think, 4 different types of science, with all their knowledge, they should be able to go grab something from the ocean or somewhere and put it in a pressure chamber, change the gas in it, change the radiation in it, and take a little something and turn it into at least an amoeba. They should at least be able to
But
do
it
that with
doesn't,
water
but
or
evolution
something.
does not say that should happen.
Yes, it does. That's where it
No, it
came from.
doesn't.
Evolution comes
No,
from
no,
nothing.
no,
Nothing.
no, no, no,
Nothing
no.
came.
Wait a second, wait a second, wait a second.
Okay.
Okay, so evolution does not say that a living cow will turn into a living cactus.
I know
Evolution
they
does
don't say
not
that.
say
I'm not saying that.
Evolution does not say that a living dog should turn into a living cat. Evolution
Okay.
does not say that a living species, I should say species in front of all these, a living species of rabbit should turn into a living species of rat. It just says that that should not occur. That's not what evolution says. So that's a straw man. It's basically you are building up this thing that doesn't exist so you can tear it down, so you can burn it down.
So then that takes us back to the very beginning of time.
No, we
Where
don't
did
need to go back that far at all. No, I will, and I will tell you why, because, and this is why in one of our tweets I sent you this image from Answers in Genesis. It said that every species of feline that exists today came from one parafeline only 4,400 years ago, and they show this chart, which I sent you. I'll post a Twitter link up of my response to you using that illustration from Answers in Genesis. Answers in Genesis says that basically you had 2 felines. You had a male and a female aboard the ark about 4,400 years ago, and those 2 individual kinds evolved into every known species of cat today. Do you accept
Possible.
that?
It's
Okay,
possible. Sure.
but that's a rate of
I mean, I don't know
evolution.
if
That's
it's
a
true.
rate of evolution that's way beyond. I mean, that's only 4,400 years. That's a rate of evolution that's way beyond anything that we see in nature. That's like super hyper mega evolution. And then all of a sudden it stopped. And when did it stop? I mean, that was only 4,400 years ago. I mean, what, the cultures at that time did not notice those animals were evolving that quickly? And how long did it actually take? Because it didn't happen over 4,400 years. It must have only happened over like 100 years. Because we have, cultures that existed around that time that were raising cats, domesticated cats. So what you just said is that, it could have happened. AIG said that, two different individual felines evolved into every species that we know today. You said, yeah, that could have happened, but it must have happened over like, what, 10 years, 20 years, 100 years, 200 years? Because again, we had the Egyptians who were like domesticating cats during that time period. So that doesn't make any sense. That's why I don't understand where you're coming from. I don't understand how you can say that happened when, first of all, we know it didn't. And second, we know how cats domesticated by humans. We know how humans domesticated cats. We know how humans domesticated dogs. We know how humans domesticated bovines and wheat and corn. We know how this occurred because it's actually found in archaeological history that we can date. Hey, using carbon dating, by the way. And is found, in archaeological layers using geological methods where we see, different layers built up over time that happen at kind of a known rate in certain areas. So that's where I'm like really confused. You're saying that two cats could evolve into every species today over like a couple hundred years, and they didn't change after that for 1,000 years. Somehow evolution stopped after this super rate. I'm trying to get to these contradictions with you. That's what I'm trying to understand, is that you're making this claim, you say this is the evidence, I say, well, this is what Answers in Genesis says. You say that, well, it could have happened that way, but obviously it didn't happen that way because we know it didn't happen that way. There's no evidence it did, and all the evidence is to the contrary.
Well, okay. So let's break that down. So let's go back into the Genesis model. And
so we're going to start with like, are we going to start with the flood, or are we going to start with Genesis 7 and 8 and 9, around there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they get off the boat.
What about before the boat? What about before the boat was built? Yeah.
You want to know what was on there before?
Well, no, I just, because we're talking about, because what I brought up was how Answers in Genesis said that there were two individuals, a male and female, from felines that evolved into all the known species that exist today of cats, of felines. So, yeah, was there just two individuals on the Noachian Ark, and as Answers in Genesis says, was that Noachian Ark about 4,400 years ago?
Well, what Genesis says is that it takes 2 of every unclean animal and then 7 of every clean animal. That's what it says. So
what's the difference between the two?
I don't know.
Okay,
I mean,
just checking. Okay.
I don't know, but that's just what it says. So I mean, there's a lot of speculation.
It's mainly it's mainly in Leviticus, but we can go into that later if you want.
Is that where it's at? Okay. So so you have, I mean, to me, I don't see how this can even be a possibility, because especially when you look at, I don't want to hardly bring this up yet, but I mean, so you have all these animals coming off the ark, and the Bible calls them kind, K-I-N-D, not species, anything like that. So it's just like they're a kind, and the creationists
and there's only 2
or 7, depends. I don't know.
Well, yeah, if they're clean or unclean, okay, yeah.
But even at that, I mean,
but
that's
still, if there's 7, they're all the same. They're just 7 of one kind. So basically, it's like saying there's 7 Great Danes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's very, to me, it's easy to think that what could have happened, according to Genesis, is that they got off the ark, and God told Moses to replenish the earth, or not Moses. He told Noah to go replenish the earth, and so that's what he was told to do, and the animals did it. And I mean, we could talk about the one ice age that they believe in instead of the maybe 6 that you might believe in. So so they left the ark, and they spread out like God had asked them to do. And at the time, they're predicting now within the next 500 years, the ice age happened because of the flood. The flood, you've probably read all this. So all the
Okay, so the ice age. So according to you, the ice age happened around 2,000 years ago.
no,
No, because the ark,
500 years.
the ark
500.
happened around. Oh, I'm sorry. I misspoke. I'm sorry. So the ark was around 2,348. So basically, yeah, the ice age
4,500.
happened around 3,900 years ago.
Probably, yeah, it's possible, yeah.
What?
So,
Okay, so let's stop.
at any rate,
Let's stop there
so
really
what I'm
quick.
saying is, so
Yeah.
just let me finish what I'm saying. So,
All right. I'm
so,
sorry.
so during that time, and of course you've read this about the flood, I'm sure too, that it could have pushed the continents away at a high speed and caused the mountains
Yeah.
to grow, all these different things. So you've read that in Genesis. I know you don't want to believe it, but it's
No,
I'm
that's
not
not in
saying it happened, but
Genesis.
I'm
That's
saying
that's
it's
not in
very
Genesis.
possible.
That's Walt Brown. That's hydroplate. So
Yeah.
that's not in Genesis. That's something totally different. Yeah.
Okay. So, but it's hypothesized by Christians that's what could have happened. So, so if the ice age happened, it would have sucked up all that water and put it up in the North Pole and the South Pole. And now the animals have the ability to walk on dry land in some places across where it's ocean now to um, to Americas, South America and North America. Um, and yeah, so I mean that's very possible. It could have happened like that. And then of course it's been melted. So the Earth has been warming ever since. So it's all possible. We weren't there. So, and it all fits with the Genesis narrative. I mean, for instance, well, and as they went, they adapted. I mean, so the elephants, for instance, you got the mammoth. They find those up in I guess, up in Russia, up in the north part of Russia, and even Canada. So, and to go back, they think that even during possibly the Ice Age, the Eskimos walked across the Bering Straits up in Alaska to where they lived, and they think that the Indians in the southwest of the United States, that's who they are. They're Eskimos. They some stopped to live in Alaska, some came from China and came on down to or Asia. I think they say Asia on down all the way down to Mexico, and if it was after the flood, then they would have had the information that Noah had, and so they would have known how to build boats. There's a lot of things they would have had knowledge to do. So there's a lot of possibilities there that they could have known if there's any truth to Genesis at all.
So why is that not found in Genesis?
What's that?
What you just
Because
said.
Genesis doesn't say it. Genesis doesn't tell you how it made the eyeball. It doesn't
Actually,
tell you
no,
that.
no, no, no. We're not
And
getting to
science
the
can't either.
eyeball. We're getting to what you just said about the Ice Age, about humans moving from Asia to the Americas. Why doesn't it say that? In fact, it doesn't say that. And this goes to the Usher chronology as well. Do you know what happened according to Genesis about 100 years after the Noachian flood?
100 years after it. You mean
Yeah,
the Tower of Babel?
exactly.
Okay.
So that happened according to Genesis. That happened about 100 years after the Noachian flood. So basically, what you're saying is that all humans must have, because I mean, only 100 years later from how many reproducing couples? Three
Three.
reproducing couples, because Noah and his wife didn't have any children after that, right? So basically, from 3 reproducing couples within 100 years, you have enough languages to where they can build a tower to heaven, and then after that, and you're saying approximately 400 years after that is when the Ice Age occurred. Because that's what you just said.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, sure, the Bible doesn't talk about it, but
No,
so
no,
what?
it actually, no, it does.
Talks about the Ice Age?
No, no, it doesn't talk about the Ice Age, of course. It talks about what happened after the Tower of Babel, and it gives a genealogy of the people who existed, and it has nothing about an Ice Age. That's the
Yeah.
whole point.
Well, I know it has all the names of the children, the grandchildren, great grandchildren of Ham, Shem, and Japheth.
It
It's
has
all
nothing
listed
about
there.
an Ice Age.
I
Has
agree.
nothing about them
I agree.
spreading to North America unless you believe Mormonism in some way, I guess. I don't know.
No,
Um,
I don't think the Ice Age is listed in the Bible at all. No,
okay.
no.
So there's no evidence from the Bible that the Ice Age happened
That's true.
after the flood, even before
Right,
the flood.
right.
Okay. Okay.
But that doesn't mean the Ice
So,
Age didn't happen just because it's not in there.
okay.
That doesn't
No,
mean
but that's
that doesn't
good.
mean that the
No,
creation
no,
of
that's
man.
getting, no, I'm fine with that. I just wanted you to say that. So that gets to my next question,
Sure.
which is, you were saying that around 4,300 years ago, there was an ice age that caused all the glaciation events that we see worldwide, including like the Great Lakes, the Grand Canyon, because that
No,
was caused
nothing.
by runoff from, from some glacial lakes.
Yeah. No, Noah's flood caused the Grand Canyon, and there's
Oh
other
no,
Grand
no,
Canyons
no,
around.
no. But wait a second. But wait.
Okay.
There's a but the glaciation event is what caused the water to build up. Okay, so we're going to the Grand Canyon. But anyway, you're saying that the Great Lakes, we'll skip on the Grand Canyon for right now. You're saying the Great Lakes, which pretty much every scientific research that you read out there shows how they were made by the glaciers. You're saying the Great Lakes were caused by the glaciers around 3,900 years ago.
Could have been. I don't know.
No,
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 no.
not could have been. Not could have been. That's what you just said.
Yeah. Um,
They must have been. They must have been based off of what you just said. You were saying that around 3,900 years ago, the glaciers were covering half of Europe, going almost all the way down to the Mediterranean. They were covering about half of North America, going almost all the way down to, well, it depends on where you're talking about, but like lower New England states, even farther south of New York, because we know that like Long Island in New York is based off of a glacial moraine. It's going all the way down into like Ohio and, past the Dakotas into Montana. So you're saying about 3,900 years ago, that's where the glaciers were at. Because that's where we have evidence of them actually existing.
okay. Well, I don't know. I'd have to check into. I guess I
But that's
haven't
what
really
you're saying.
looked at those. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I'm just,
Fair
but
enough.
you just said that. You just said that. That's why I'm just
Okay.
confirming. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's
So that's
possible.
interesting because, no, it's not possible. I mean, if it was possible, you would give me evidence for it.
Okay. Well, I'll look it up.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, like I
Well,
said, I mean,
I'm surprised
every,
you haven't before because that's what you're basing your argument off of.
well, that's not
Do
my
you want?
only basis.
Oh, I know,
That's
I know, I know.
that's
I'm just
one.
following what I presented one thing. That's what you came up
Yeah,
with. So I'm just continuing your line of thought. Yeah.
fair enough. But again, I mean, every line of thought that you have, the creationists have another line of thought that says just the opposite. So I just don't know that one yet. That's all. I'm sure they had that question. There's a lot. There's a whole lot of them. There's not just one or two
Mhm.
of them. There's thousands of creation scientists out there. So I can.
But what again is a creation scientist?
Well, there's
That's
somebody.
I still don't understand what you're saying by that. You're basically saying that creation scientists are scientists that accept young Earth creationism, right?
Right.
Okay.
But I
So
mean,
basically you have all the Christians out there that accept evolution. They are not creation scientists because they accept evolution, they accept geology, they accept physics, they accept chemistry, they accept linguistics, they accept psychology, sociology, they accept, all these different fields. They accept geophysics, which gives us oil and coal. They're Christians who accept that the earth is billions of years old, but they are not creation scientists because a creation scientist would be someone who accepts that there was an ice age 3,900 years ago.
well, you're doing circular type of.
No, I'm just repeating to you what you just said. I'm nothing
Oh,
circular here. I'm just
well,
confirming what you just said.
so does it really matter what another Christian thinks to what I think, or what a creation
Well,
scientist thinks?
well, no, wait.
Does it?
Let's not go to creation scientists. Let's just stick with what you just said. Well, I think in a way it does matter what, different fields of Christianity or any religion say, because, that's why we've had so many wars about them in the past. I mean, come on, the United States, you know, less than 150 years ago, you had Catholics killing Protestants in the United States, just like what happened in Ireland only 40 years ago. That was happening here in the United States. So yeah, it is a big deal. The disagreements in theology are a big deal. If you were a Lutheran and you were a Baptist around that time, you'd probably be trying to, make sure that your daughter was not going to marry a person of another faith and Protestant theology. So it is a big deal in a lot of ways, and it's still a big deal today because we see it all over the earth. And
Well, I disagree.
in within religion, different families of religion as well as within different families of Christianity. That's just history. It's a known fact that happened. So it's a huge deal. That's why I'm kind of wondering why you are saying that Christians who do not accept science are not Christians, I guess, and
never
why
said
only and well, but you're
that's wrong.
implying it.
I never said that.
But you're implying it, and why
No, not at
creation
all.
scientists are really
Not
the
at all.
only people who really accept the Bible, I guess.
Well, if I'm implying that, I apologize
Okay.
because I don't mean to be
Well,
implying that.
okay.
Because
Well, thank you,
I don't
because
think
it seems like that's where you're going with that. Yeah.
I don't think belief in evolution or creation has anything to do with your Christianity.
Okay. So why do the majority of Christians today accept evolution, that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, and in the world, not just in the U.S. Why do they accept that? And why do people even from other religions accept science at actually much higher rates overall worldwide? Why do people in other societies who are different religions than Christianity also accept evolution and science? And why do they not accept young Earth creationism from a Christian view of the Noachian flood happening 4,400 years ago?
Well, there's basically, to me, a Christian is someone who believes in Jesus Christ and that he
No,
was
I,
alive, that he
we all
died,
know
and he
that.
rose
We all know
again.
that. That's the
To me,
definition of
to
a
me,
Christian.
that's a.
Yeah.
But to me, that's a Christian. Beyond that, it's wide open.
So
So
is a creation scientist only a Christian?
don't have to be a Christian. No, they don't have to
But
be.
but you just said that creation scientists base their understanding off of the Noachian flood happening 4,400 years ago, approximately.
Sure, that don't make you a Christian.
So they could also be Jewish or Arab, but no other religion. Besides maybe if you consider Baha'is and Mormons and Rastafarians Christians in some way.
I guess, yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think has anything to do with anybody's salvation or whatever. And
But we're
well,
talking about science. We're not talking about salvation. Yeah.
Christianity says that if you don't believe that Jesus died and rose again, then you're not going to heaven. So you know that. So I don't know what to say about the Buddhas and the other ones. You know, the um, Muslims. I don't know what to say about them, but that's what it says. And so
But we were talking
so
about the flood.
so I mean, what you're
We
suggesting,
weren't talking about salvation. We were talking about the flood.
right? So all I'm saying is because I think you're trying to say that unless you believe in creation, you're not a Christian. Well, I disagree with that. I
No,
don't
no,
think.
no. I did not say that. I think
Okay.
you were saying that. What I was saying is that if you do not accept Christianity, then you cannot be a young Earth creationist.
I'm not saying that.
Okay. So why is it that young Earth creationists are Christians, and there's pretty much no other religion that accepts young Earth creationism out there?
I wouldn't know why.
Okay.
Why does it have to be? Why does it
Why
have to be
are
real?
all well, I'm just trying to understand where you're coming from. Why
Okay.
are all young Earth creationists Christians, pretty much? I mean, why do we see that? And why is there a basis for that belief based off of a flood happening 4,400 years ago, approximately?
Well, I'll say this for me. Um, so when I went to school, um, they taught nothing but secularism. There was no Christianity whatsoever in the schools I went to. None.
That's really weird because this is before Madam Murray O'Hare basically got Christianity out of school. So you must have been going to a really liberal school in some area because pretty much all schools in the U.S. before that time basically taught Christianity in schools.
I didn't hear. I don't remember hearing anything about Christianity in school.
Well, good
I
for
mean, did
you
we have those
because
classes?
that was an odd
The
one
school
out.
I
You
went to
must have been
didn't have
living in a different area
transgenderism, none of that
of the
stuff.
country.
None of that stuff. I mean, well, I mean, if they did it, I didn't pay attention to it. I'll say that. And I did pay attention to the evolution stuff they taught. So, and when you say study, I wasn't like the biggest studier either. I mean, I just kind of listened. I was a pretty good listener, but I wasn't. I mean, I didn't like to take books home and read them, but
Okay.
I would at least, I'd get B's and C's in school. So I mean, I listened good, was able to pass tests. So,
So, what do you think is the main thing they taught you about evolution when you were like in high school?
well, that you mean as far as about evolution?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
What did yeah in a high school biology science class? What did they teach you about evolution? What was your takeaway at that point? Because that's kind of where we started,
Yeah.
and
Well,
I'm
that's
only
what I.
going there because we've been it's been
Yeah.
over an
If
hour.
we're going to go,
I just remember that you said you only wanted to talk about an hour, or maybe do like hour sessions. So I don't want to like
yeah.
I want to wrap this up going back to what you said when we started out. So
Okay.
what was the main takeaway that you had from your high school? I wanted to say high school because even though evolution is taught in junior high school, it's really taught in high school. That's where it really comes in, and they tie together paleontology, which is fossils, and DNA, which is genetics, and that neo-Darwinism, they don't really call it that anymore, but that neo-Darwinistic synthesis happened like in the 1950s when genetics really started to take off, where they were matching together paleontology and genetics. So what did you learn? Because you're about that age where you were going to high school, um, probably in about the 1970s. So, when you were in high school, what were they teaching you about evolution? And,
That we
what
came
was
from
the main takeaway that you got from it?
that we came from the ocean, turned into amphibians, turned into chickens, or whatever.
We Are you talking about
They did.
humans doing that? Because like
Yeah,
I mean, okay, so
that's true.
here's the first misunderstanding that I want you to uh, to know that you were taught incorrectly is that basically all vertebrates, in fact, pretty much all life that it currently exists on land came from the ocean. But if we're talking about stuff like humans and chickens and uh, iguanas and frogs, you know, they all came from the ocean at some point according to evolution. So it wasn't just humans. So yeah, so that's one point.
Well,
So you think,
humans still came from a single cell out of the ocean.
okay,
That's what I
well,
was taught.
but before a single same cell came out of the ocean, it was still a vertebrate that
No, no, it would
wasn't.
have been. It started out as one single cell somewhere in the heat
Mhm.
of the creation 4 million years ago, or whenever it was.
Okay,
4
4
billion.
billion, and you're talking about abiogenesis at this point, basically life from no life.
Yeah, so it came from so one cell turned into a protozoa, into an amoeba, into a splitting amoeba, into a into a plant. Then these plants
Hmm.
kept producing into something new, and then into finally it turned into a maybe a frog. I don't know. I mean, they don't know exactly, and they didn't tell us they knew. They just said this is what happened. I mean, they weren't trying to tell us,
But
like the Bible. They
okay,
weren't
so
telling us exactly what happened. Just that it happened.
yeah, I have some textbooks from like the 1960s and 70s and 80s. And what you were describing is probably like the first 2 pages in a textbook on evolution or even biology. So that's the first 2 pages. So what is the rest of what you learned about evolution during this time period?
I don't know.
I mean, it's probably not even 2 pages. It's probably like the first 2 paragraphs. But anyway, yeah,
Yeah, I don't remember anything else really.
okay. And you know, I
So you're
I think in a
suggesting
way
that.
that's
So I mean, so what are you saying happened then? You're saying that it went from this single cell. How did it turn into a vertebrae and a non-vertebrae and a stalk of corn, a apple tree? I mean, how did that happen? Because it
yeah. I mean,
had to start from one cell, right?
sure. So if we're gonna not even go into abiogenesis, basically life from non-life, if we're going to talk about starting from, some of the first unicellular organisms, the first organisms that were just one cell in the ocean, one of the first big evolutionary advantages that occurred to a single cell organism is it went from being prokaryote to eukaryote, which I brought up in a tweet with you.
Okay.
So,
I might not know what you're talking about because I
yeah.
don't know.
No,
I
I
don't
was
know
hoping
science.
you would look that up, which is why I brought it up, because I remember bringing it up just recently because I knew we were going to have this discussion, so I hope you would have looked that up. But yeah, basically a prokaryote and a eukaryote, the biggest differences are that a prokaryote, all of the DNA is not contained within a nucleus. All the DNA is pretty much one ring or multiple rings of DNA, basically kind of like one or multiple chromosomes that are in a ring shape without a nucleus, without organelles. They're only single cellular organisms.
Okay.
Difference between eukaryotes and eukaryotes are you and I and trees and fungi, if we want to talk about the kingdoms of life, and protists, which are still single cellular. Protists are. The
So,
biggest difference is that eukaryotes have a nuclear membrane. Basically, they have a single place where all the DNA is found inside of the cell, so inside of the nuclear membrane, and they have organelles in the cell. So basically, they have these different parts of the cell that do different specialized functions. And then you get to multicellular eukaryotes, and that's the big groups I was talking about, like fungi, plants, and animals.
so
So,
is that reproducible today?
well, we see it in the fossil record.
No. No,
We
that's not
pretty
the
much
question.
know how we pretty much know how it occurred. And the thing about being reproducible is that this is kind of a really strange term when it comes to um, the creationist argument. Science being reproducible, I don't think means what you think it means. It doesn't mean that we should be able to do it in a lab. It means we should be able to make a prediction about it and then find that prediction somewhere, right? So we should be able to say, well, here we have this eukaryote, and inside the eukaryote, there are these organelles called mitochondria. And then in plants, there are also these cells called chloroplasts. And these mitochondria and chloroplasts have their own DNA that's separate from the DNA of that's found in the nucleus of a eukaryote. And inside of a chloroplast and a mitochondria, that DNA actually can be traced back to other prokaryotic unicellular organisms. So we know that mitochondria actually came from something that is very similar to what exists today, basically a prokaryote.
Great. Can you tell me what
Yeah.
prokaryote means?
Yeah, again, prokaryote is where basically you have a unicellular organism that does not have a nucleus. The DNA
Okay.
kind of freely floats around, and it's usually in the shape of rings. I
Okay.
have to go back and see if it's always in the shape of rings. But yeah. And then
Okay.
a eukaryote has a nucleus where all of the chromosomal DNA is found. But also they have these other little things called organelles. Basically, if you think your body with organs, a cell has its own little organs inside of it. And some of those organelles inside of a eukaryote are mitochondria, which basically burns oxygen and produces energy for the cell. We're not going to go into the whole ATP process. And then, of course, you have chloroplasts, which also have their own DNA. And both mitochondria and chloroplasts have DNA that are, again, in those circular shapes that are similar to eukaryotes, or prokaryotes, I'm sorry. So basically, the idea here is something called endosymbiosis, where basically you have one cell goes to eat or devour another cell, doesn't fully do so, that cell becomes incorporated, and so those two cells are living symbiotically together. And they are benefiting one another.
Yeah.
And we can see that the
So their DNA mixes?
DNA and mitochondria, no, it
Okay.
doesn't mix. That's the whole point. That's actually the point which shows that this is probably what happened, as far as we know, because there's no other explanation for it, is that the ring structure inside of prokaryotes is the same ring structure found inside of mitochondria and chloroplasts in certain organisms that we find today. In chloroplasts, it's like blue-green algae. In mitochondria, I can't remember what the current analog for that is, basically the current species that looks like that. But, we have this evidence that that's what occurred. That's like kind of the first step. That should have been in your textbooks, because I know I have it in textbooks again that I have from like the
But even
50s,
still,
60s, and 70s.
fair enough. And all that you said is probably true. I'm not doubting, the evidence. But
But you're trying to explain it using the Bible,
no, well, no.
or
I'm
saying
not.
that it's
No,
explained by the Bible or
no,
explained
not
by
even
biblical
necessarily.
history.
What I'm saying is the Bible tells us what happened, and then we can look at the evidence and say, yes, that's exactly possible. That's how that could have happened.
But the Bible doesn't tell us about the ice ages.
So again, I haven't looked into that the way you're talking about it. So I'll look into it the way you're mentioning it. So I'll see.
You
But
brought up the date. That's the only reason I'm bringing it up, because you said
yeah,
that the Bible said that the ice ages happened about 500 years after the flood, so about 39,000 years ago. So that's why I bring it up, only because you brought it up.
fair enough. Fair enough. I'm just saying I've never heard your debunking of it before, but I'm just saying that what you just said is probably debunked by them too. So and they're scientists. I mean, you can't. They're paleontologists. They're geologists. They're all schooled. Many of them, like I said, at Harvard. They're schooled in famous places. So it's not like they're not scientists. I mean, it may be 10,000 to one on an average. We don't know the number, but that's what you're suggesting.
We
So
kind of do.
yeah, and it may be true. I have no idea. So, and I don't even care, because to me, the obvious thing is these same things that you just mentioned, they're not repeatable. I mean, that I can see. I mean,
It
turn,
doesn't
turn,
need to be. It doesn't need to
it
be
does need to
repeatable.
be. It has to be.
No, no,
It
no, it does
doesn't
not.
not need to be. It has to be. Has
Does
to be
not.
proven by you, and proven and repeated. Has to be. It cannot be any other way. You cannot say that something is true if you can't repeat it. That otherwise it's
Sure.
just conjecture, it's just guessing, and you're just guessing on what happened on your evidence. And
Yeah,
another
that's
person can
not,
look at that same evidence and say, "There's no way that could happen that way." So
but that's
so I
not the
can't
way science
go.
works. So I
I
think
can't
that's where,
but I can in my heart say that unless you can repeat something, you're just guessing. I mean, to me, what you said. I'm not trying to be. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be loud here, but I don't know how um, this Star Trek thing you brought up. But I mean, I think I love Star Trek, and I love The Fly. I love those kind of science fi stuff. I mean, that's where I live. But it's just there's no way that stuff is probably ever going to happen, and you're suggesting that it will. So we just don't have the mechanism yet. I don't know. But I mean, so the point is, as you read through the Bible, even Job, he talks about, Job's all upset about, about he lost his family and all of his friends are against him and all that. And then finally God says, "Where were you when I created the earth?" So, God had finally had enough of his complaining. So, I mean, sure, it's just a story and it may be false. I don't know, but it rings true and it goes along with the creation story. And, another thing that I think that you have to also say is that you've got, I don't know, 15 different authors in the New Testament. I'm not counting them, but, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You got Paul, you got Titus, you've got James, which is the brother of Jesus. You have all these different authors. And so they're just flat out liars, is what you're suggesting. I mean, they're just lying to beat the band. So, I mean, there's no other way that it can be said. So, I suppose there's a scenario where they could all be liars, is what you're saying, right?
not at all,
Well,
because the
you have
authors,
to be
the
saying that they're
authors that the authors that you just brought up are either repeating the mythology that they learned, or they are not talking about evolution. They are not talking about how the earth was made. They're talking about theology. So, bringing up these authors that you just brought up, that has
Mhm.
nothing to do with the scientific conversation that we are trying to have about evidence for the Noachian flood, or the fact that, 3,900 years ago there was an ice age. They bring up nothing about that. And they're not supposed to, because they are relaying the theology and the understanding that they had about the culture they grew up in at the time they were living. So it has nothing to do with the conversation that we're having right now at all. They could say that they believed, or that Jesus said that there was a 6-day creation event. But that statement, I'm sure you could fill like 3 lines on a piece of notebook paper about what they say about that. And that's about it. And I'm just talking about like verses, in 12-point font. That's probably all you could fill
I
up.
mean,
And they
that's
hardly
all I'm
say
talking about.
any and they hardly say anything about it, because it's part of their known culture and theology at the time. It has nothing to do with what we are trying to discuss, which is the evidence for these actual events happening. You why are you saying that the flood happened at a certain time, that there was an ice age, about 500 years after it? Why are you denying, these fields of science by attacking it with theology? That's the discussion that we're trying to have. I'm not going to confuse that with, the theological writings in the New Testament, or the understanding that the Hebrew culture had of, the shape of the earth being flat, which it pretty much does say, because it's in there in scripture, and they were basing it off of the current understanding of all of the cultures at the time that the earth was flat. I'm sure that you don't accept the earth is flat. I hope you don't. So
I got a friend.
those, yeah, I'm sure we all do. I haven't heard it for a while from one of my friends, but yeah, I'm sure we
I
all
do.
do.
You think I'm kidding, don't you? I really do.
So, but the point here being, I'm glad we have a laugh out over that, is that it's again, it seems to be this theological attack on science when I'm not
I'm
asking
not
for a
attacking science.
theological, I'm not asking for theology to support your position. I'm asking for how do you support some of the things you're saying about the theology that you have in your position that seems to override everything that we know about the world around us as far as science explaining it. And that's why I've tried to press certain issues and try to really understand where you're coming from, because I still don't see that. I think you are taking it on faith, and that's why you brought up faith early. Is that I'm not taking it on faith. I'm taking it on the fact that, again, we have all these different fields of science that have no relation to one another as far as the evidence they are using, but the conclusions they come to match. And that just should not occur. You shouldn't have physics
Well,
matching geology, matching biology, matching chemistry as far as how old certain things are, including the age of the Earth, including when certain events happened in Earth's history. They should not match one another. They're taking independent evidence that is not even related to one another, but they're coming to the same conclusion, and that just shouldn't happen, unless it actually did happen.
well, again, I mean, we can break things down one at a time. I mean, I'll look into that flood thing and the ice age, like you said. So I'll look into that. So I've never heard it quite said the way you said before, but anyway, I'll look into that.
I
That's
appreciate it.
that's a good argument that you have. I mean, I appreciate that one. So, for instance, I was
I
just
hate
reading
I hate to
the other day
interrupt,
about,
Craig. I hate to interrupt, but
yeah,
we're just past the hour and a half mark. I usually try to keep these shows to about an hour and a half because
yeah.
apparently people
On
hate.
Thursdays, you've got other things
No,
to
no.
do.
Apparently, no.
Oh, that as well. I know.
Yeah, people seem to hate longer shows, so we get less views if we go over an hour and a half. And so I really enjoyed the conversation so far, and I want other people to be able to see that too. We did have one question that's not science related, but I still want to throw it in there. We had one question from the chat from my friend Ember. And Ember asked, how did Noah tell which kinds were clean and unclean when the law of which is only mentioned around the time of Moses? I'm not sure if that's the case, though, but...
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that comes from Leviticus, and I need to look it up. It's been a long time since I've
Yeah.
done that study myself. I will look that up, and if she wants to send like a tweet to me, I'll send the source for it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my first guess answer to that would be Noah didn't have to know. He was just maybe standing there as all the animals went on the ark. I mean, he didn't go out and get the animals; they went out on their own. So he didn't know.
Okay.
That's
I'm not going to make this mistake to say it
guess.
has something to do which animals you can eat, because I feel like I've made that mistake before. I think it has something to do with something else, but it's not necessarily based off of kosher,
I think you're
dietary
right.
restrictions or anything like that.
I think you're right about that because a pig, they weren't able to eat pigs until after Jesus came back. Jesus left, and then Peter had the animals come down. From then on, animals were clean, and then also they could bring the non-Jews into the fold of being a Christian. So
And Gentiles and shellfish and
yeah,
there's a few other things, but yeah,
I did.
look that myself.
I did have two additions actually to the conversation. So earlier, Craig, you asked if people are breeding rabbits and they should get to a different kind of animal. I don't know if you've ever heard of the silver fox experiment, which is something that happened in Russia. a breeder of silver
I feel like I
foxes.
might even know who asked that question.
Yeah, a breeder of silver foxes was getting tired of them being so aggressive, though, so they started breeding the more docile silver foxes. And over a period of, I think it was 50 years, they finally ended up with something that looks exactly like a dog. It's not a dog because
Well, no,
it's still a silver fox, but they got floppy
It looks like a
ears.
silver fox, but
Yeah, they
yes.
got floppy ears. They got different kinds of fur. They got different tails. So that is basically the example you asked for. Although it is still a silver fox because you can't outgrow your own lineage. But it's no longer
so
the
the point
silver
is-
fox as we know it.
Well, the creationists say that they're all felines, or not felines.
Canines.
Canines.
What do you call a dog?
Canines.
Canines. They're all canines. So you had two canines that came off the ark, and they turned into foxes, wolves, the rest of them. But the point is that those ones you're talking about, according to creation science. So if they bred them into these things that look like dogs, you can't take those same two and breed them back into the original silver fox because you've breeded out that DNA. That's the way they'd look at that. So sure, you can take something and breed it into another kind of a dog, another kind of canine.
But that's what evolution says, right?
No.
Yes.
Well, evolution may say that, but that's not what evolution can't do that because it fits the creation off of Noah's Ark.
But again,
thing. If they came off as a
evolution
couple,
does not say that you could do that. I think
yeah,
that's
it
the
doesn't
point.
say that.
What I'm trying to
So
say.
the point is,
What I'm trying to say, with our knowledge of evolution, we can do artificial selection and come up with a new kind of animal, if I want to translate it to your vernacular. So this is exactly what evolution says that can happen. And we've not only done that with the silver fox. I mean, that's how we got corn. Corn was made by humans out of grass.
Even better, using what you just brought up, if you were an alien and you came to Earth after humanity was wiped out and all civilization right now, instantly, but you could find like all the skeletons, you would look at all of the domesticated types of dogs on the Earth and you would have thought they were all different species. Because they are so different from one another.
Yeah. But I do want to wrap it up, and I have one more thing for Craig. You mentioned
I'd like to answer that though.
Okay, go ahead.
I would like to answer some of the, you go ahead, but I want to answer your.
What I wanted to suggest is maybe we can do another show where we can continue the things, and you can exchange a couple of things. So Scipher can look in some of your arguments, you can look into some of his arguments. Maybe that would be a good continuation. But you mentioned the movie is Genesis History earlier.
Genesis History, yeah.
Yeah. So in that movie, there's also a guy called Todd Wood. Are you familiar with him?
Not by name.
So he has a big segment in Is Genesis History, where he explains how evolution can't work, etc. Are you aware that on his personal blog, there is a page in which he says that he is basically lying because he knows that evolution is not only a fact, but there are no holes in evolution. There's tons and tons of evidence for evolution. And the only way he cannot accept evolution is because of his religion, and he isn't allowed to acknowledge this. I can send you the link to his blog, to his personal blog, so you can check that for yourself.
What was his name? What was
His
name
name's
again?
Todd Wood.
Todd Wood. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, a friend of mine actually found that page, and so Todd would first try to hide the page, but people could still get that through the Wayback Machine. So it's now back up with an addition where he acknowledges that all atheists are now over his blog looking for that specific page. And I have to give him credit that he didn't take the page down. It's still up, even though he basically discredits everything he says in all of the Genesis videos, which is kind of mind-boggling.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm just the opposite of that. I went from evolution to creation, so evidently he's gone from creation back to evolution.
No. He's still a creationist. He is still a creationist, and he still works. He still works for.
You make it sound like he didn't believe in creation.
No. He knows that what he's telling people is not the truth. That's what I'm saying, and that's what he is explaining on that page.
Interesting.
It's kind of like the statement of faith that Answers in Genesis has. It basically says that you cannot be a part of Answers in Genesis unless you kind of disavow yourself from reality.
It's very specific that all evidence that goes against anything that the Bible says has to be dismissed immediately because it can't be taken into consideration. That every creationist ministry has that statement of faith on their website. So does Answers in Genesis, and it's public. So
I'll write that down too. I've seen that.
Yeah. So I want to thank both of you gentlemen for a fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed it. I think the people in chat had a really good time too. And maybe we can set this up for a sequel and see where we go from there. So I
think next week at this time would be good for me. I don't know if you want to set it up yet, but you know.
I don't think I can do next week because I only stream on a Thursday because I've got a lot of different channels that I work for. So the Thursday is basically my dedicated day. I have to check with my guest. If he's not available on Thursday, then absolutely we can do that. But I do have an upcoming guest, so we'll have to check with him whether or not he's going to be able to come on. For the people who are interested in my show with Jackson Wheat, that is usually at 7 p.m. Central. We're not going to have a show this week. And next week, hopefully we'll have Donald Prothero on. So
nice.
That should be an interesting show. Especially for those who are interested in learning more about evolution, because he's written a couple of books.
Paleontology.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you, gentlemen, for coming on. I'll start with you, Scipher. Any last words?
No. I mean, the only thing I really have to say is thank you so much, Craig. Really enjoyed the conversation. It gave me a lot to think about because you brought up some stuff that I've never really thought about in a certain way before. That's why I was kind of pressing you on so many questions. And it was really engaging. And I totally appreciate your answers and what we had to discuss. It was very interesting and enlightening. And thank you very much, Peter.
Yeah, and I think you're being honest, so I appreciate that. Yeah.
Craig, any final words?
No, I mean, I'm just going to go back and look up those three things, about the Ice Age, about how it could have made the Great Lakes in such a short period of time. I didn't really get a chance to explain how the kinds work. I think I didn't get that out, but I think we can discuss that on the next one. I hopefully get that out.
You went through a lot of topics in an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So, I mean.
Yeah. I think when you see the kind thing, I think that fits the science perfectly. So anyway, we'll discuss that later. So.
Okay, I want to thank everyone in chat, especially Pragmatic Crystal. one of our newer moderators, putting in all kinds of links. I put in the links to both of your Twitter accounts and to Scipher's YouTube account. So people who aren't subscribed yet to Scipher, please do, because there will be new videos, or so I'm told. Okay, that's it for us for today, and we'll see you on the next show. Bye, everyone.